Hey, it's Des back with another video. On this one, I'm going to be talking about Granit Xhaka. So for me, obviously, as the season started, initially I wanted us to upgrade on the centre mid. I still feel like we can upgrade it on that position long term, but there are some, due to the way Xhaka's playing, there are some flexibility in that with that situation. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that, some of the reasons why I feel like we can maybe continue with Xhaka, at least for the moment, whilst waiting for the younger ones to develop. But yeah, so let me go straight into it. So, Granit Xhaka, let's look at before we even go into some of the positives that he's been showing this season. Let's talk about some of the flaws that he showed in the previous season. So when he first came here, he was playing more as a defensive mid, and even after that, he was playing in a deeper position, even in a 4-2-3-1. So some of the issues or some of the flaws that he had shown. Let's talk about some of the technical flaws. For example, we look at his lack of ability under pressure. So when he's playing in that deep position, for him to not be able to play under pressure or not be able to evade pressure and create passing angles, like say someone like Partey is able to do, that means therefore he's at risk of losing the ball in a position that's close to our box. So he's at risk of giving the ball away where the opposition can quickly score from. If a turnover is to happen on the edge of a box, that's a risk of us conceding a goal. So immediately that's a technical flaw that he already has there already. We can go to the maybe the more tactical flaw. We know defensively he does have some issues in terms of his positioning, in terms of being able to read the movement of players off the ball, movement of players running in behind him. He wasn't the most natural defensive player in terms of understanding positioning, knowing where to stand, and knowing how to read these sort of runs. So therefore, he was at risk of us conceding chances for the mere fact that he wasn't able to read these movements behind that someone who's a more natural defensive mid is able to read. So again, that's more of a tactical flaw. Then we look at more of the physical flaw. We know he's not that mobile. We know he's not quick and things like that. But when you're in that position, at times you have to make recovery runs because you can't always read every single play. Even the best defensive mid has to make recovery runs, yeah, and try and track back or cover for other players. If you have to cover on the left hand side or maybe you have to shuttle to the right hand side and cover, you still have to make cover run because you can't always be perfect. At times things will go wrong and you would have to make those recovery runs. And he lacked the mobility, the pace to do that. So that's a physical quality where he lacked it as a physical flaw. So let's look at what advantages he's gained in this new system in playing higher up the pitch. So as I mentioned initially, I spoke about the technical flaw he had, where it was by he was losing the ball under pressure closer to our goal, whereby it was at risk of us conceding goals. But now that he's a lot higher up the pitch, the risk is less because if he loses the ball higher up the pitch, he's miles away from our goal anyways. So it doesn't really affect us as much as it would affect us if he was closer to our box. So automatically him playing in this more advanced role is already an improvement in that sense because the risk of us conceding has reduced significantly. So then you then move to more of the tactical flaw which I mentioned in terms of his defensive positioning. Now that he's playing a lot higher up the pitch and we have someone like Partey or like this or the defensive mid basically behind him, he's not the main focal or the main guy who's responsible for defensive actions. He basically has to defend what's in front of him. So he's not responsible for having to position himself whilst we have the ball. He doesn't have to be the one that's responsible for that thing. He doesn't have to keep in mind that if my players are all attacking, I have to be in this position. I have to be in this position. He doesn't have to think about that because it doesn't come natural to him anyways. So he's not responsible for that aspect. So again, that's already the tactical flaw that I mentioned for him playing defensive mid. That's already covered up by him playing in a more advanced role because that's not his responsibility. He has less defensive responsibility from that position. Then we go to more of the physical flaw, which I mentioned, in terms of things like being making recovery runs and covering. So because we're a team that press higher up the pitch, therefore a lot of the times Xhaka is going to have to defend what's in front of him. And when Xhaka has to defend what's in front of him, he's a very physical player and a very tenacious player. So when he has to defend what's in front of him, for me that's never been the issue. Xhaka defending what's ahead of him has never been an issue. The issue has always been what's going on behind him, the sort of runs, the angled runs that's behind him, or trying to recover. But the mere fact that he's not the main defensive mid and he's someone who's going to have to drop back because we defended 4-4-2, so he's going to have to drop back whilst a different defensive mid, this one being Partey, is positioned there to deal with the recoveries, the positioning, and all he has to do is slot back in and defend what's in front of him. it makes it a lot easier for him, and it covers that aspect of his flow where he doesn't have to make the position. He doesn't have to be the best positionally or the best at making recovery runs. So all he has to do is focus on defending what's in front of him. And the fact that we also press high up as a team as well, it means more time he's defending what's ahead of him. He's pressing what's ahead of him. He's not having to do too much of what's behind him. Because when we press up, you have guys like Partey, Saliba, Gabriel, Tierney, Ben White, who are just behind the press, who are waiting to grab up any second ball that goes loose, or if the opposition tries to bypass our press, they're there to quickly sweep that up. So we have players in position who are better at doing that than Xhaka, who are there. So all he basically has to do is defend what's in front of him, as opposed to what's behind him. So that is already a big improvement. That's already a big improvement and something that's covered his flaws for him playing higher up. So now that I've mentioned what his flaws are and how that position has sort of covered that up, now let's talk about what he brings to the team, or what he's bringing to that position, and why he's been having such a good season. So we can start by his understanding of the system. I've always mentioned that one thing that Xhaka has is intelligence. He's a very smart player, and he understands what Arteta wants and how we want to play. He understands the role of every player, and you can see that on the pitch by him directing players to be in the position they're supposed to be. When you look at that link up between Martinelli and Zinchenko, one of the reasons why it works so well is because he knows when to fill in for the others. He knows when to fill in for Martinelli. He knows when to fill in for Zinchenko or Tierney. He knows when to be deeper. He knows when to be higher up. He also understands that even though he doesn't have the most defensive responsibility, he still has to drop back and be next to Partey and offer him support. So he's got a great understanding of the game. He understands what's ahead of him. He understands when he needs to position himself in the half spaces and when he needs to attack the space in the final third. So that's one thing that he brought there, is the understanding of the game. And also another thing that he's brought to that system is he's a lot more physical than in other seasons. I don't know if that's just me, but from what I can see, he just looks very physical. He even, not that he looks quicker, but he seems a lot more tenacious, a lot more sharper. He seems a lot more like in these 50-50 situations, he seems to be a lot stronger and a lot like less of what he used to be before, where it was a bit more flimsy. But he looks, I don't know what, but to me he just looks a lot more physical this season, which is something that he's bringing to that position, along with the understanding of the position, the tactical understanding of the position, and the fact that he's a lot more physical in that position as well. He's bringing a lot to the game there, because if you have a midfielder that's physical, knowing and being able to move into the final third and understanding the position, he's able to apply those two things together. So first of all, I mentioned the intelligence of understanding the position, and I also mentioned the physical quality of what he brings to that game as well. Now let's talk about what he brings into that position as well, in terms of the technical qualities and the things that he adds to it, along with the intelligence and the physical aspect of it. So then, which one of these things is the attacking runs it makes into the final third, the third man runs it makes, the fact that he always makes himself like a free man in that place, a free guy who's open to receiving in space. So whilst we're attacking on one side, he leaves himself free in that left hand half space, and he always finds a space whereby it's difficult to mark him. So if you look at some of the goals that he scored, or some of the assists that he's made, where he's cutting back, even the ones that didn't lead to goals, you see him cut back to Gabriel Jesus or cut back to Saliba, where they either score or they get a shot on target. It's because he's making these runs into the box and making himself free by attacking these spaces, leaving himself free in space and allowing players to find him. I believe this is something that Ramsey used to bring to us, where it's like, whilst everything is happening, the players are moving around and making all these runs, he just slowly makes this run into the final third. The defenders find it hard to mark because he's making a run from deep. So with Xhaka, he's either making a run from deep, or he's swapping with, let's say, someone like Martinelli from wide, and then attacking the final third. You see what I'm saying? So it's very difficult to mark the runs, and he's making his runs really smart. So again, all of a sudden, understanding the position, the runs that he's making, the physicality, the fact that he can continuously keep on doing this over and over and over again for 90 minutes, because we know his fitness is really good. Plus the fact that he's in the final third, he's really direct. So he's going for, when you look at Odegaard, for example, in the final third, where he goes for more of the ball retention aspect of it than for someone who's more direct. I'm not gonna say Xhaka is Kevin De Bruyne or Bruno Fernandes light, but what he's been offering us in this past 7 games is someone that's very direct in the final third, which is something that we don't really have, because we have Odegaard, for example, who's not as direct, which obviously we've wanted him to be more direct and maybe play passes that's not on, but just try to force things at times, which is something that people take away from Bruno's game, because we say that he is very direct and just continuously plays these passes. But at times when you have players like De Bruyne and Bruno who just continuously force passes in there, it leads to chances being created. And this is what Granit Xhaka is offering us. He's very direct this season. Just so the fact that he's putting himself in this position, finding free space, and when he's free in space, he's very direct with his passing into the box and his crosses into the box. We saw that lead to the goal that Gabriel Jesus scored in the last game against Brentford. So that just shows how direct it is, and the fact that he's choosing a more high risk game and a more direct game over ball retention shows just what he's bringing to the team. So he's bringing a lot to the team, as I've mentioned. He's bringing a lot of qualities that he's adding, as well as what's being covered in terms of his flaws. He's also bringing stuff to the game and bringing stuff to the team as well. So that, for me, that's why I think he's been having a great season so far, and I feel like it's something that I can see him continue to offer for the whole season, because he's a player that when he reaches a level, he's able to maintain consistency because he's able to keep himself fit. So when we look at what we can do in the market, because I have said the centre position is a priority position and it's something we need to upgrade on. But when you look at the fact that we've got guys like Smith Rowe, Fabio Vieira, Charlie Patino, I don't want to mention the young 15-year-old Nwaneri, if that's how you mention his name, but we've got a lot of young players in there that potentially, if they developed in the right way, they could be better than the options that are in the market. So maybe if Xhaka continues to perform as he's performing right now, maybe we can rely on him whilst waiting for these players to develop into the guy who replaces Xhaka in that position. So maybe then he saves us having to go into the market to buy a player that maybe in the future might not be as good as the young players that we have currently in our squad. So hopefully Xhaka can continue to perform at this level, and hopefully some of the young players that we have in that position can develop in the right way and eventually overtake from Xhaka. But we just have to see if he continues to perform like this, then maybe we don't have to start to look for an upgrade on him in the market. Anyways, see you guys in the next video.